Electronic, who also led the research and verification for loudness standards of the ITU, Mr. Thomas Lund. Also would like to introduce another gentleman who happens to be the Gateway Massenburg Studios engineer in Portland, Maine, and he asked me to just say that, but you guys know him as Bob Ludwig. I would also like to introduce a mixing and mastering engineer who happens to be a friend of mine for Jay-Z and Beyonce and a member of the P&E Advisory Council, Gamel Guru Keaton. And finally, I would like to introduce your moderator, who is a professor and researcher at McGill University, Mr. George Massenburg.
Thanks, Simon. That's great. Good morning. You guys okay? We are so looking forward to this, and I hope we can make an effective presentation here. The Loudness War is over if you want it. Each and every one of you will need to make a decision whether you want to work to these standards and live within these standards, and I hope we add to your confidence and the knowledge that some real work has gone into this. Just in passing, I've been meaning to say this for years. I'd like to tell you that Andrew Sheps has not won the Loudness War. That's bullshit. And he's bullshit. And I hope he's here. Andrew, are you here? Too bad. We hope that music-loving audiences will win going forward. We're in it for the audience. We're in it for the advocacy. Two things. Loudness normalization is not theoretical. It's not vague. We're pretty sure that each one of you can measure the loudness of your product, your asset, your clip, and come up with a number and do the right thing. Loudness measurement is an organization across an ever-expanding number of people and organizations. It's determined by math. Billboard can't buy math. This is not a guess. This is not something that can be hyped. It's not black magic, it's math. It's a number. Either buy it or you don't. We hope you'll be convinced. We'd like to get right into this so that we can leave plenty of room for questions from you guys. We really want to hear what you think. So, Thomas Lund, my old friend.
Thanks, George. So I'll start with a little. George has asked me to not be too technical, so I'll try to not be, hopefully. But if there are details you're missing, then please ask in our Q&A later on. But anyway, as George said, this is actually an age-old problem that has been solved now. And it has been verified in many, many countries, basically most countries in the world using audio production. So it has been verified, of course, in Europe and the US, in Japan, in China, Brazil. Many, many countries have done this independently. So it's a pretty strong standard we have, and it's open source. Open source means that it's not a commercial standard. It was originally, actually, I don't know if he's here today, Gilbert Solutre from CRC in Canada. Sometimes he wants me to put his name in French, sometimes in English, but I don't know if Gilbert or Gilbert is here today, but he was actually the guy who originally sort of came to this very simple solution. There was a shootout between a lot of loudness models, and his simple solution won and was made open standard. So this has been adopted by ITU and ATSC, EBU, Japanese and Chinese and Korean broadcasters. Everywhere it's been adopted, actually. And you could say, as I'm saying in this slide, that it has already saved digital television. And this is how it sounded a few years ago here in the US.
When I'm watching the game, I don't want those ads coming on loud. I don't want to pick up the clicker. You know, this is practical, makes a difference right away.
En president som lagstiftar om ljudkvalitet.
Okay, so this was a Swedish radio program, and at the end, the commentator said, so here we have a president that actually makes a law about sound quality. And not only sound quality, but also, of course, to prevent loudness jumps. And that's a big and important issue for most listeners. So let's have a quick look, not a technical look, but a quick look at transients and average level. So a high ratio between transients and average, what does that mean? It generally correlates with audio quality, punchy music, and in speech programs, speech intelligibility. On the other hand, a low ratio promotes listener fatigue and is harmful for the auditory system. And the latter is pretty important also because actually there are more and more regulations now in Europe. We're probably the first where there will be regulated for personal audio devices. So if the average level is too high, it will simply turn down by itself. So it's not a question of what Spotify or Apple or somebody else decides with normalization, it will just be turned down by the device. Otherwise, they cannot sell these units in Europe in a few years' time. So, and that's pretty well indicated to do it this way because the auditory system is not harmed by peak level, at least not the levels we're talking about here. It's harmed by continuous noise, so it's average level. All medical research show this. So let's, again, without being too technical, let's consider, we have two tracks here, and let's consider the first one. It has, if you measure it from start to end, it has a loudness on this scale, LUFS, LUFS scale, of minus 16.5. The next track has a loudness reading of minus 6.5. So the number 2 is much louder than the first one. On the average, actually, technically louder because the LU, you could say size of LU is the same as dB. So it would be highly annoying for the listener here, or he or she would at least need to readjust the level. And there have been some AES papers about this. So what you could say the jump tolerance track to track, what is annoying once you've set your level, you can expect that around 50% of your listeners would want to adjust the level if the next track goes up by 3 or down by 6. So I put a little red dot here to indicate that we have an annoying situation here. So let's consider if we had 5 tracks in a row, then we can have 4 little red dots here because they're all annoying. But let's now see what happens if we normalize, for instance, at minus 14 on this scale. It means that all tracks that are above minus 14, which has, for instance, minus 6.5, will go down to minus 14, but tracks that are already at minus 14 or lower will be untouched. This is what I would call the new principle that, for instance, Tidal have successfully launched. So let's now look at the next tracks here. This is the levels we get, and of course I've selected them so we get 4 green dots instead, but most of the time you actually do. So it's a pretty elegant system. You still get small differences, but for instance, you might also have a like soft movement in a classical concert or something like that, which could be much softer, and you don't necessarily want it brought up to the same level as everything else. So it's generally, this attenuate only principle is pretty good. But now let's consider this, that we don't want to have a, you could say, build an infrastructure with a low clearance, because that means that everybody will try to adjust their programs to that. So these guys actually have quite an obligation, and because we've said this many times, we have these circles of confusion where production and distribution and consumption work together in a spiral, so they affect each other. And that's of course very unfortunate when we see classic work, not classical music, but for instance also excellent albums like Paul Simon's Graceland, and we can see this one here, you see a little, this is a reading from a little free app. I'll give you the URL to a little bit later, but maybe you can read the numbers. But the 1986 version is here, and this is the 2012 version, and it's gone up by around 6 or 7 dB, and it's been more squashed. So you can also, this is, loudness is in green and in orange, and peak level is in blue on this diagram.